My son looked me in the eye and said, "You need to step back, Mom. We don't want you around." I didn't argue. I just hugged my grandchildren one last time and left in silence. The next day, an attorney showed up at his door with documents. When my son saw what it was about, he broke down in tears and cried, "Mom, what have I done? Mom, you need to step back. We don't want you around anymore." Those 8 words shattered my entire world on a sunny Saturday afternoon in April. My own son, Michael, 44 years old, standing in the living room of the house I helped him buy, telling me I was no longer welcome in his life. The same house where I'd spent countless weekends caring for my grandchildren, cooking Sunday dinners, being the grandmother I always dreamed of being. It was Saturday, April 20th, 2024, at exactly 3:15 in the afternoon. I remember because I kept glancing at the clock on the mantel, willing time to rewind, to take me back to before this nightmare conversation started. We'd just finished lunch, pot roast with roasted vegetables, Ethan's favorite. My grandson, 9 years old, and his little sister Olivia, 6, were playing in the backyard, their laughter drifting through the open window like it always did on these perfect spring days. I was at the kitchen sink, hands deep in soapy water, washing the lunch dishes like I'd done hundreds of times before. That's when Michael walked in. His face looked different, harder somehow, like he'd practiced this moment in the mirror. My heart dropped before he even opened his mouth. You know that feeling? When your body knows something terrible is coming before your mind catches up? "Sit down, Mom. I need to talk to you." I dried my hands on the dish towel, the one with little sunflowers that I'd given them last Christmas. My legs felt shaky as I pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. Then Tiffany appeared in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, wearing that expression I'd seen so many times lately, that tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, that look that said she'd been waiting for this moment. "Michael, just say it," she said, her voice clipped and impatient. My son took a deep breath, and I watched his chest rise and fall like he was preparing to dive underwater. "Mom, Tiffany and I have been talking, a lot, and we've come to a decision that your presence here is disrupting our family dynamic." The words hit me like a physical blow. I literally felt the air leave my lungs. "What do you mean, son? Disrupting how? You interfere too much with how we're raising the kids. You question our parenting decisions. You're here all the time, and honestly, we need space to be our own family." Tears started streaming down my face before I could stop them. My whole body began to tremble. "Michael, sweetheart, I'm just trying to help you both. Ever since Olivia was born, I've only wanted to support you and make things easier." "Exactly, Mom. 6 years of this. 6 years. It's enough." Tiffany stepped forward then, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Eleanor, you're a wonderful person. Really you are. But," she paused, and that "but" hung in the air like poison gas. "But we need to establish boundaries. We're a family unit, and we need to function as one without constant outside involvement." Outside involvement. That's what I was to them now. Outside involvement. Not the grandmother who rocked Ethan through colic for hours when they were both too exhausted. Not the mother who dropped everything when Olivia spiked a fever of 103 degrees and they needed someone at the emergency room at 2 in the morning. Not the woman who'd given them $85,000 for their down payment on this very house. My throat closed up completely. I couldn't speak, couldn't defend myself, couldn't even ask why. I just sat there, tears running down my face, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. "I understand," I finally whispered, though I understood nothing at all. I didn't argue. What was the point? My own son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died 15 years ago, wanted me gone. I pushed myself up from the chair, my legs barely holding me, and walked to the backyard on autopilot. Ethan and Olivia were building a fort with sticks and old blankets. "Grandma, look!" Olivia shouted, running to me with her arms wide open. I hugged her so tight, breathing in her little girl smell of sunshine and grass and strawberry shampoo. Then Ethan, who was getting too big for hugs but let me anyway. They had no idea it was goodbye. How could they? How could anyone understand that in the span of 15 minutes, everything had changed? I walked to my car, a 2020 Honda Civic that I'd bought used 3 years ago to save money, always thinking about helping Michael if he needed it. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Tiffany watching from the front window, her face expressionless. The drive home to my apartment in Myers Park took 20 minutes, but I don't remember a single moment of it. I just kept thinking, what did I do wrong? Where did I fail as a mother? How did we get here? But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly have imagined, was that this rejection was just the beginning. The truth hiding beneath the surface was so much worse than I could have dreamed. And when I finally uncovered it, everything I thought I knew about my son would crumble into dust. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you love, someone you'd give your life for, leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. And if you love stories about real family drama and how we survive it, hit that subscribe button because this story is just getting started. Let me take you back so you understand how deep this goes. My name is Eleanor Richardson. I'm 72 years old, and I've lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, my entire life. For 35 years, I worked as a registered nurse at Atrium Health Carolina's Medical Center, mostly in pediatrics because I've always loved children. I retired in 2017 with a decent pension, about $3,200 a month, which isn't fortune, but enough to live comfortably. My husband Daniel died in 2009 from a sudden heart attack. He was only 55, gone in an instant while mowing the lawn on a Sunday morning. Michael was 29 then, already married to Tiffany for 2 years. Losing Daniel nearly destroyed me, but I had to stay strong for Michael, you know. Even though he was grown, he needed his mother. Michael works as a civil engineer at a construction firm downtown, making good money, around $90,000 a year. Tiffany is a marketing executive at a tech startup, always talking about metrics and KPIs and brand positioning. She's 40 years old, always dressed like she stepped out of a magazine, with perfect nails and perfect hair and perfect everything. From the day I met her, something felt off, but I chalked it up to new mother-in-law jitters. When they got married in 2015, I tried so hard to bond with Tiffany. I invited her to lunch, sent her thoughtful gifts, asked about her work. But there was always this wall between us, this coolness that never quite thawed. She was polite, sure, but it was that surface-level politeness that keeps you at arm's length. Then Ethan was born in January of 2016, and everything changed. Tiffany struggled hard with postpartum depression. She'd call me crying at midnight, saying she couldn't do it, that she was failing as a mother. So I did what any grandmother would do. I packed a bag and moved into their spare room for 3 months. I took care of that baby like he was my own. Night feedings, diaper changes, laundry, cooking, cleaning, everything. Michael was working long hours on a big project, sometimes not getting home until 9 or 10 at night. Tiffany would sit in the nursery just staring at the wall, and I'd bring her tea and tell her it would get better. And it did get better. By the time Ethan was 4 months old, Tiffany was smiling again, bonding with her baby, getting back to herself. I moved back to my apartment, but I still came over 3 or 4 times a week to help out. When Olivia was born in 2018, the same pattern repeated. Maybe even worse this time. Tiffany barely got out of bed for the first 6 weeks. So again, I moved in. Again, I became the primary caregiver while my daughter-in-law recovered. I told myself I was building a bridge, creating a bond with my grandchildren, being the support system every young family needs. Looking back now, I can see the signs I ignored. The way Tiffany's face would tighten when I'd suggest activities for the kids. The comments that seemed innocent, but weren't. Eleanor, you really don't need to come over every Saturday. Or Michael saying, Mom, Tiffany and I can handle bath time ourselves. But I brushed it all aside. I was helping, wasn't I? I was being a good grandmother, a good mother. That's what family does. About 2 years ago, I started noticing stranger things. Tiffany would end phone calls abruptly when I walked into a room. They canceled Sunday dinners more frequently. When I'd offer to babysit, they'd say they already had plans, even though I could tell they were just staying home. Then one evening last November, I came over unexpectedly with a casserole I'd made. Michael's favorite chicken and rice dish. I had my own key, which they'd given me years ago for emergencies. When I let myself in, I heard Tiffany on the phone in the kitchen. I'm telling you, Sarah, she's here constantly, every weekend, sometimes during the week. I feel like I can't breathe in my own house. Michael won't say anything because he feels guilty, but I'm at my breaking point. I stood frozen in the entryway, casserole dish burning my hands through the oven mitts. My heart was pounding so loud I thought she'd hear it. I quietly backed out, closed the door softly, and sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying not to cry. But I told myself I'd misunderstood. She was just stressed. Everyone needs to vent sometimes. I was being too sensitive. That's what we do, isn't it? When someone we love shows us who they really are, we twist ourselves into knots finding excuses for them. Because accepting the truth means accepting that we've been fooling ourselves all along. After that, I tried to pull back a little. I'd wait for them to invite me instead of just showing up. I'd ask before offering help, but it never felt like enough, and I never felt like I was doing the right thing. And then came that Saturday in April when everything exploded. When my son looked me in the eye and told me I was no longer welcome. When the family I'd sacrificed so much for decided I was the problem. What I didn't realize then was that my presence wasn't the real issue. I was just in the way of something much bigger, much darker, something that would make that painful rejection seem like a mercy once I uncovered the whole truth. The betrayal of a mother's love. Act I, the devastation. 6,000 characters. Mom, you need to step back. We don't want you around anymore. Those 8 words shattered my entire world on a sunny Saturday afternoon in April. My own son, Michael, 44 years old, standing in the living room of the house I helped him buy, telling me I was no longer welcome in his life. The same house where I'd spent countless weekends caring for my grandchildren, cooking Sunday dinners, being the grandmother I always dreamed of being. It was Saturday, April 20th, 2024, at exactly 3:15 in the afternoon. I remember because I kept glancing at the clock on the mantel, willing time to rewind, to take me back to before this nightmare conversation started. We'd just finished lunch, pot roast with roasted vegetables, Ethan's favorite. My grandson, 9 years old, and his little sister, Olivia, 6, were playing in the backyard, their laughter drifting through the open window like it always did on these perfect spring days. I was at the kitchen sink, hands deep in soapy water, washing the lunch dishes like I'd done hundreds of times before. That's when Michael walked in. His face looked different, harder somehow, like he'd practiced this moment in the mirror. My heart dropped before he even opened his mouth. You know that feeling? When your body knows something terrible is coming before your mind catches up? Sit down, Mom. I need to talk to you. I dried my hands on the dish towel, the one with little sunflowers that I'd given them last Christmas. My legs felt shaky as I pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. Then Tiffany appeared in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, wearing that expression I'd seen so many times lately. That tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, that look that said she'd been waiting for this moment. Michael, just say it, she said, her voice clipped and impatient. My son took a deep breath, and I watched his chest rise and fall like he was preparing to dive underwater. Mom, Tiffany and I have been talking, a lot, and we've come to a decision that your presence here is disrupting our family dynamic. The words hit me like a physical blow. I literally felt the air leave my lungs. What do you mean, son? Disrupting how? You interfere too much with how we're raising the kids. You question our parenting decisions. You're here all the time, and honestly, we need space to be our own family. Tears started streaming down my face before I could stop them. My whole body began to tremble. Michael, sweetheart, I'm just trying to help you both. Ever since Olivia was born, I've only wanted to support you and make things easier. Exactly, Mom. 6 years of this. 6 years. It's enough. Tiffany stepped forward then, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Eleanor, you're a wonderful person. Really, you are. But, she paused, and that but hung in the air like poison gas. But we need to establish boundaries. We're a family unit, and we need to function as one without constant outside involvement. Outside involvement. That's what I was to them now. Outside involvement. Not the grandmother who rocked Ethan through colic for hours when they were both too exhausted. Not the mother who dropped everything when Olivia spiked a fever of 103 degrees, and they needed someone at the emergency room at 2 in the morning. Not the woman who'd given them $85,000 for their down payment on this very house. My throat closed up completely. I couldn't speak, couldn't defend myself, couldn't even ask why. I just sat there, tears running down my face, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. I understand, I finally whispered, though I understood nothing at all. I didn't argue. What was the point? My own son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died 15 years ago, wanted me gone. I pushed myself up from the chair, my legs barely holding me, and walked to the backyard on autopilot. Ethan and Olivia were building a fort with sticks and old blankets. "Grandma, look!" Olivia shouted, running to me with her arms wide open. I hugged her so tight, breathing in her little girl smell of sunshine and grass and strawberry shampoo. Then Ethan, who was getting too big for hugs but let me anyway. They had no idea it was goodbye. How could they? How could anyone understand that in the span of 15 minutes, everything had changed? I walked to my car, a 2020 Honda Civic that I'd bought used 3 years ago to save money, always thinking about helping Michael if he needed it. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Tiffany watching from the front window, her face expressionless. The drive home to my apartment in Myers Park took 20 minutes, but I don't remember a single moment of it. I just kept thinking, what did I do wrong? Where did I fail as a mother? How did we get here? But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly have imagined, was that this rejection was just the beginning. The truth hiding beneath the surface was so much worse than I could have dreamed. And when I finally uncovered it, everything I thought I knew about my son would crumble into dust. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you love, someone you'd give your life for, leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. And if you love stories about real family drama and how we survive it, hit that subscribe button because this story is just getting started. Act 2. The Foundation of Denial, 5,000 characters. Let me take you back so you understand how deep this goes. My name is Eleanor Richardson. I'm 72 years old, and I've lived in Charlotte, North Carolina my entire life. For 35 years, I worked as a registered nurse at Atrium Health Carolina's Medical Center, mostly in pediatrics because I've always loved children. I retired in 2017 with a decent pension, about $3,200 a month, which isn't fortune, but enough to live comfortably. My husband Daniel died in 2009 from a sudden heart attack. He was only 55, gone in an instant while mowing the lawn on a Sunday morning. Michael was 29 then, already married to Tiffany for 2 years. Losing Daniel nearly destroyed me, but I had to stay strong for Michael, you know. Even though he was grown, he needed his mother. Michael works as a civil engineer at a construction firm downtown, making good money, around $90,000 a year. Tiffany is a marketing executive at a tech startup, always talking about metrics and KPIs and brand positioning. She's 40 years old, always dressed like she stepped out of a magazine, with perfect nails and perfect hair and perfect everything. From the day I met her, something felt off, but I chalked it up to new mother-in-law jitters. When they got married in 2015, I tried so hard to bond with Tiffany. I invited her to lunch, sent her thoughtful gifts, asked about her work. But there was always this wall between us, this coolness that never quite thawed. She was polite, sure, but it was that surface-level politeness that keeps you at arm's length. Then Ethan was born in January of 2016, and everything changed. Tiffany struggled hard with postpartum depression. She'd call me crying at midnight, saying she couldn't do it, that she was failing as a mother. So I did what any grandmother would do. I packed a bag and moved into their spare room for 3 months. I took care of that baby like he was my own. Night feedings, diaper changes, laundry, cooking, cleaning, everything. Michael was working long hours on a big project, sometimes not getting home until 9 or 10 at night. Tiffany would sit in the nursery just staring at the wall, and I'd bring her tea and tell her it would get better. And it did get better. By the time Ethan was 4 months old, Tiffany was smiling again, bonding with her baby, getting back to herself. I moved back to my apartment, but I still came over 3 or 4 times a week to help out. When Olivia was born in 2018, the same pattern repeated. Maybe even worse this time. Tiffany barely got out of bed for the first 6 weeks. So again, I moved in. Again, I became the primary caregiver while my daughter-in-law recovered. I told myself I was building a bridge, creating a bond with my grandchildren, being the support system every young family needs. Looking back now, I can see the signs I ignored. The way Tiffany's face would tighten when I'd suggest activities for the kids. The comments that seemed innocent, but weren't. "Eleanor, you really don't need to come over every Saturday." Or Michael saying, "Mom, Tiffany and I can handle bath time ourselves." But I brushed it all aside. I was helping, wasn't I? I was being a good grandmother, a good mother. That's what family does. About 2 years ago, I started noticing stranger things. Tiffany would end phone calls abruptly when I walked into a room. They canceled Sunday dinners more frequently. When I'd offer to babysit, they'd say they already had plans, even though I could tell they were just staying home. Then one evening last November, I came over unexpectedly with a casserole I'd made, Michael's favorite chicken and rice dish. I had my own key, which they'd given me years ago for emergencies. When I let myself in, I heard Tiffany on the phone in the kitchen. "I'm telling you, Sarah, she's here constantly, every weekend, sometimes during the week. I feel like I can't breathe in my own house. Michael won't say anything because he feels guilty, but I'm at my breaking point." I stood frozen in the entryway, casserole dish burning my hands through the oven mitts. My heart was pounding so loud I thought she'd hear it. I quietly backed out, closed the door softly, and sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying not to cry. But I told myself I'd misunderstood. She was just stressed. Everyone needs to vent sometimes. I was being too sensitive. That's what we do, isn't it? When someone we love shows us who they really are, we twist ourselves into knots finding excuses for them. Because accepting the truth means accepting that we've been fooling ourselves all along. After that, I tried to pull back a little. I'd wait for them to invite me instead of just showing up. I'd ask before offering help, but it never felt like enough, and I never felt like I was doing the right thing. And then came that Saturday in April when everything exploded. When my son looked me in the eye and told me I was no longer welcome. When the family I'd sacrificed so much for decided I was the problem. What I didn't realize then was that my presence wasn't the real issue. I was just in the way of something much bigger, much darker, something that would make that painful rejection seem like a mercy once I uncovered the whole truth. The first 3 weeks after that devastating Saturday were the longest of my life. Imagine not seeing your grandchildren when you've seen them almost daily for years. No goodnight calls from Olivia asking me to sing her the lullaby I made up. No texts from Ethan about his baseball games. Just silence, cold, suffocating silence. I'd wake up every morning at 6:30, my usual time, and for a split second, everything would feel normal. Then reality would crash over me like a wave, and I'd remember, they don't want me anymore. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling of my small 2-bedroom apartment, wondering what I'd done to deserve this. My sister-in-law, Brenda, Daniel's younger sister, called me that first Monday after it happened. "Eleanor, honey, I heard what happened. Michael called me yesterday." Her voice was gentle, careful, like she was talking to someone who might break. And maybe I was broken. I felt broken. "I don't understand, Brenda. I've given them everything. My time, my money, my heart. How did I become the villain in my own family?" "You're not the villain. Don't you dare think that. Something's not right about this whole situation. Michael sounded strange on the phone, stressed about something more than just boundaries with you." I didn't think much of it then. I was too deep in my grief to see beyond my own pain. But Brenda's words stayed with me, a small seed planted in the back of my mind. By the second week, I started going through old memories, trying to find where I'd gone wrong. I'd pull out photo albums and see Michael as a little boy, gap-toothed and grinning, and wonder where that sweet child went. Then I'd see pictures from Ethan's and Olivia's births, me holding them in the hospital, tears of joy streaming down my face. That's when something else started nagging at me, something about money. Back in February, about 2 months before the big rejection, Michael had called me on a Wednesday evening. "Mom, hey, I need to ask you something kind of important." His voice had that tone, you know the one, where you can tell they're about to ask for something uncomfortable. "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" "I've got an investment opportunity through work. One of the senior partners is putting together a group to invest in a commercial property development. Returns are supposed to be really good, like 15 to 20% annually. But I need to come up with $18,000 by the end of the month to buy in." $18,000. That was more than half of what I kept in my savings account for emergencies. But this was my son, my only child, and if this would help him build wealth for his family, how could I say no? "Michael, that's a lot of money. Are you sure about this investment?" "Absolutely, Mom. I've looked at all the paperwork. It's solid, and I'll pay you back by April with interest, I promise. You'll actually make money on this loan." Something in my gut twisted, but I ignored it. Mothers do that, don't they? We ignore our instincts when it comes to our children because we want so badly to believe in them. "Okay, honey, let me transfer it to your account tomorrow." Thanks, Mom. You're the best. This is really going to help us out. Now, sitting in my apartment in early May with no contact from my son for 3 weeks, I realized he'd never paid me back. April had come and gone. I'd even sent him a gentle text on April 30th. "Hi, sweetheart, just checking in about the investment repayment when you get a chance." He'd responded, "Dealing with some issues at work. We'll get back to you soon." That was it. Nothing since then. I started thinking about other things too, like how Tiffany was always talking about expensive purchases when I'd visit. "Oh, Michael surprised me with this Louis Vuitton bag for our anniversary," she'd say, stroking the leather like it was a pet. That bag probably cost $3,000, and the new television in their bedroom, a 75-inch OLED that she mentioned cost $4,000 on sale, and the vacation to Turks and Caicos they took last December, posting pictures from a resort that I knew ran at least $800 per night. My pension is decent, but I'm not wealthy. I live modestly, shop sales, drive a used car. How are they affording this lifestyle on their combined income with a mortgage, 2 kids, and all the other expenses? The math wasn't adding up. That's when I called Brenda back. It was a Tuesday evening, May 7th, and I'd been pacing my apartment for an hour trying to talk myself out of what I was about to do. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. "Brenda, I need to ask you a huge favor, and you can absolutely say no." "What is it, Eleanor? You work at First Citizens Bank, right? In the loan department?" "I'm actually in commercial lending, but yes." My hands were shaking as I held the phone. "Could you possibly look into Michael's financial situation? Not anything illegal, just what's publicly available? Credit checks, anything like that? I feel terrible even asking, but something's not sitting right with me." There was a long pause. I could hear Brenda breathing, considering. "Eleanor, that's walking a fine line. If Michael found out..." I know I'm asking you to potentially damage your relationship with your nephew. But please, Brenda, my gut is screaming at me that something's wrong. Call it a mother's intuition or call it desperation, but I need to know." Another pause. Then, "Let me see what I can find out through proper channels. Give me a couple days." Those 2 days felt like 2 years. I barely slept, barely ate. I'd replay every conversation I'd had with Michael over the past year, looking for clues I'd missed. And there were clues. So many clues I'd been too blind or too trusting to see. Like last Christmas when Michael had asked me not to spend so much on gifts for the kids. "Mom, you're too generous. Save your money for yourself." At the time, I thought he was being considerate. Now I wondered if he was trying to preserve my savings for his own purposes, or the time in September when he'd asked if I'd ever consider selling my house in Myers Park. I'd owned that house for 40 years, the house where Daniel and I raised Michael. It was worth about $450,000 now, paid off completely. Why would I sell, sweetheart? It's my home. I just thought, you're getting older. Might be easier to be in a smaller apartment or a retirement community. And you could use that money to really enjoy your retirement, travel whatever you want. I'd laughed it off. I'm 72, not 92. I'm perfectly capable of maintaining my home. But now that conversation took on a sinister tone. Had he been trying to get me to liquidate my biggest asset? And for what? When Brenda finally called back on Thursday evening, her voice was tight with tension. "Eleanor, you need to sit down for this." My heart started racing. "What did you find?" "Michael's credit score has tanked over the past 6 months. It's down to 540. That's really bad, Eleanor. He's maxed out on at least 4 credit cards that I can see, totaling around $50,000. And he's got 3 personal loans outstanding with different lenders." The room started spinning. I sat down on my couch before my legs gave out. $50,000 in debt? How is that even possible? He makes good money. That's what I wondered too. So I called in a favor from a friend who works in collections at another bank. "Eleanor, this is the part that's really going to upset you. Just tell me. Michael's been using your social security number as a reference on applications. And according to my friend, there was an attempt to take out a loan of $85,000 in your name 3 months ago. It was flagged as potential fraud because the application came from a different IP address than your usual banking location, and the bank called you to verify. Do you remember that?" I did remember. A woman from SunTrust had called me in February asking if I'd applied for a home equity loan. I'd told her absolutely not, that it must be a mistake or attempted fraud. She'd thanked me and said they'd close the application immediately. "Oh my God!" The words came out as barely a whisper. "Michael tried to take out a loan in my name? It looks that way. Eleanor, I'm so sorry. This is serious. Identity theft, forged documents, this isn't just financial trouble. This is potential misdeeds. I couldn't breathe. The man I'd raised, the boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers, the son I'd sacrificed everything for after his father died, had tried to steal from me, had tried to ruin my financial security for his own gain. And suddenly, the rejection made perfect sense. I wasn't being cut out because I was overbearing or interfering. I was being cut out because I was in the way. Because as long as I was present in their lives, asking questions, being aware of what was going on, it would be harder for Michael to continue whatever scheme he was running. Tiffany knew. She had to know. That's why she'd pushed for the separation. Keep Eleanor away, keep her in the dark, and they'd have free rein to do whatever they wanted with my name, my credit, my life savings. The betrayal hit me in waves, each one worse than the last. My son wasn't just in trouble. He'd actively tried to harm me to solve his problems. And the daughter-in-law I'd cared for, supported, practically raised her children for her, she'd encouraged it. I sat on that couch for 3 hours, crying until I had no tears left. Then, something shifted inside me. The grief hardened into something else, something colder and more focused. I wasn't going to be a victim in this story. I was going to fight back. The next morning, Friday, May 10th, I called my attorney, Richard Peterson. I'd known Richard for 23 years, ever since Daniel and I had hired him to handle our estate planning. He was semi-retired now, only taking select cases, but we'd remained friends. Richard, I need to see you as soon as possible. It's about Michael. He heard something in my voice because he didn't hesitate. Come to my office this afternoon, 2 o'clock. I spent the morning gathering documents, bank statements showing the $18,000 transfer to Michael, printouts of texts and emails about the repayment, notes I'd made about all the expensive purchases Tiffany had mentioned, the call log showing when SunTrust had contacted me about the fraudulent loan application. At 2 o'clock sharp, I sat across from Richard in his office overlooking downtown Charlotte. He listened to everything, his expression growing darker with each detail. Eleanor, this is very serious. Document forgery, misuse of a social security number, attempted identity theft. These aren't just civil matters. These could be charges that involve law enforcement. I don't want to send my son to prison, Richard, but I need to protect myself, and I need him to face consequences for what he's done. Richard nodded slowly. There are ways to handle this. First, we need to document everything thoroughly. Second, we need to secure your assets immediately. Do you have a will? Yes, from when Daniel died. Everything goes to Michael. We need to change that immediately. And we need to put protective measures in place on all your accounts. Credit freezes, fraud alerts, everything. We spent the next 2 hours going through every detail of my financial life. Richard made notes, asked questions, built a strategy. By the time I left his office at 4:30, I felt different. Still hurt, still angry, but also empowered. I wasn't helpless. I had options, but I wasn't done investigating. I needed to know the full extent of what Michael had done. How bad was this really? That weekend, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called Michael's best friend from college, Derek Matthews. Derek and Michael had been roommates at NC State, and they'd stayed close over the years. If anyone knew what was really going on with my son, it would be Derek. Mrs. Richardson, it's great to hear from you. How are you doing? I've been better, Derek. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. When's the last time you talked to Michael? There was a pause. About 3 weeks ago. He called me pretty upset about something. Why? What was he upset about? Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Richardson, I don't know if I should... Derek, please, I'm his mother. Something's very wrong and I need to know what's going on. I heard him take a deep breath. Okay, but you didn't hear this from me. Michael's in deep trouble financially. He told me he'd made some really bad investments, lost a ton of money. He was asking if I knew any way to get quick money, like $50,000 or $60,000. I told him I didn't, that he needed to talk to a financial advisor or something. He seemed really desperate, Mrs. Richardson, scared even. My stomach dropped. Did he say anything else? He mentioned something about Tiffany not knowing how bad it was, and that if she found out, she'd leave him. And he said something strange about wishing his inheritance would come through sooner. I didn't really understand what he meant by that. Oh, but I understood perfectly. Michael was waiting for me to die so he could inherit, and when that wasn't happening fast enough, he decided to help himself to my money, while I was still alive. Thank you for being honest with me, Derek. Mrs. Richardson, is Michael okay? Should I be worried about him? He will be, I said. Once he faces what he's done and accepts responsibility for it. After I hung up, I sat in my living room as the sun set outside my window, painting the walls orange and gold. I thought about the little boy who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read him the same book 7 times in a row. I thought about the teenager who'd cried in my arms when his father died, saying he didn't know how to be a man without Daniel to guide him. I thought about the young father who'd called me sobbing when Ethan was born, overcome with love and fear. That person was still in there somewhere, but he'd been buried under financial pressure, bad decisions, and manipulation. My son needed help, but first, he needed to be stopped. Monday morning, I met with Richard again. I want to move forward with everything, change the will, document the fraud, prepare for legal action if necessary. And I want to do one more thing. What's that? I want to set up trust funds for Ethan and Olivia. Money that Michael can never touch no matter what happens. They're innocent in all this. They deserve to have their futures secured. Richard smiled. That's very wise, Eleanor, and very generous, considering what you're going through. They're my grandchildren. No matter what their father's done, they're still part of my heart. Over the next week, Richard worked on restructuring my entire estate. The new will left only 30% of my assets to Michael, with the remainder split between trust funds for the children. If Michael contested the will or continued any fraudulent activities, he'd lose even that 30%. We also prepared a comprehensive document outlining every instance of financial misconduct we could prove. The forged loan application, the $18,000 never repaid, the use of my social security number, all of it meticulously documented and verified. Richard suggested we also hire a private investigator to see if there was anything else we'd missed. I hesitated at first, feeling like I was spying on my own son. But then I remembered that my own son had tried to steal $85,000 from me using forged documents. The private investigator, a woman named Sarah Chen, was thorough and discreet. Within 5 days, she came back with information that made everything even worse. Mrs. Richardson, your son has been gambling. Online poker, sports betting, some casino visits to Cherokee. I tracked his credit card statements through public records from his bankruptcy attorney consultation records, which are accessible through the court system. In the past 18 months, he's lost approximately $78,000 gambling. $78,000. No wonder he was drowning. No wonder he'd been desperate enough to steal from his own mother. Does Tiffany know? Hard to say for certain, but the evidence suggests she's been aware something was wrong, even if she didn't know the full extent. She's been moving money into separate accounts in her name only. She's protecting herself financially, probably preparing for the marriage to implode. So Tiffany knew Michael was in trouble, but instead of helping him get help or telling me what was happening, she'd decided to protect herself and push me away. That hurt almost as much as Michael's betrayal. I'd been there for her when she was at her lowest, and this was how she repaid me. But you know what? I'd spent enough time being hurt. It was time to act. Tell me in the comments, what would you do if you discovered your own child had betrayed you like this? Would you protect them, or would you fight back? And please, if you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel because you won't believe what happens next. The next phase of my plan required something I'd never needed before: cold, calculated strategy. I'd spent 72 years being kind, being generous, being the person everyone could count on. Now I needed to be smart. I needed to be ruthless. And most of all, I needed to protect not just myself, but my grandchildren from the fallout of their father's choices. It was Tuesday, May 21st, and I was sitting in Richard Peterson's office again, this time with Sarah Chen, the private investigator. Between the three of us, we'd assembled a file that was 3 inches thick with evidence of Michael's financial misconduct. The question now, Richard said, adjusting his reading glasses, is how you want to proceed. We have enough documentation to press charges if you want. Identity theft with intent to defraud, document forgery, these are serious offenses. Or we can handle this through civil channels, demand repayment, restructure your estate to protect your assets. I'd been thinking about this for days, wrestling with what kind of mother seeks to punish her own child versus what kind of mother allows herself to be victimized without consequence. I don't want Michael to go to prison. Despite everything, he's still my son. But I do want him to understand the gravity of what he's done. And I want to make sure he can never do this to me or anyone else again. Sarah leaned forward. If I may suggest something, Mrs. Richardson, the threat of legal action is sometimes more effective than the action itself. If Michael believes you're prepared to press charges, he'll be more motivated to accept other consequences and get help for his issues. What kind of other consequences? Richard pulled out a document he'd been preparing. We serve him with a cease and desist letter detailing every fraudulent action we can prove. We inform him that any further attempts to use your information will result in immediate involvement from authorities. We present him with the revised will, showing he's lost the majority of his inheritance due to his actions. And we require him to enter a financial counseling program and treatment for the problem he clearly has. And if he refuses, then we proceed with pressing charges. But my experience tells me that when someone's this deep in trouble, being offered a way out that doesn't involve prison is incredibly motivating. I nodded slowly. Okay, but I want one more thing. I want Tiffany to know that I know she was complicit, that she pushed me away to enable Michael's behavior. I want her to understand that actions have consequences. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled through some photos. I have something you might find interesting. I've been surveilling their house for the past week, just observing patterns. 3 days ago, Tiffany met with a divorce attorney. I followed her to the office and confirmed it. She's already preparing to leave Michael. Something twisted in my chest. Part of me felt vindicated that Tiffany was getting what she deserved for betraying me. But another part felt sad for my grandchildren, who would soon be dealing with their parents' divorce on top of everything else. Those poor kids, I whispered. They'll be okay, Richard said gently. Especially because you're setting up trusts for them. No matter what happens with their parents, they'll have financial security. That's more than most children of divorce get. Over the next few days, I worked with Richard to finalize every document. The new will was ironclad, with specific language about why Michael's inheritance was being reduced. Due to documented financial misconduct, including but not limited to identity theft attempts, forged loan applications, and breach of trust, the testator has decided to limit distributions accordingly. We also prepared trust documents for Ethan and Olivia. Each trust would receive 45% of my estate, totaling about $315,000 each. The money would be managed by an independent trustee, Richard's law partner, until each child turned 25. It could be used for education, medical expenses, and basic living needs, but Michael and Tiffany would have zero access to it. I also did something else I'd been considering. I went to see a therapist named Dr. Linda Morrison, who specializes in family trauma. I'd never been to therapy before, didn't really believe in it if I'm being honest, but Sarah Chen had recommended her, saying that what I was going through was a form of abuse and I might benefit from professional support. Dr. Morrison's office was in a quiet building in South Park, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. She was about 50, with kind eyes and a calm presence that immediately put me at ease. Tell me what brings you here today, Eleanor. And I told her everything. The rejection by Michael, the discovery of his fraud, the complicity of Tiffany, the plans I was making to fight back. I cried through a lot of it, something I'd been trying not to do because crying felt like weakness. But Dr. Morrison just handed me tissues and let me feel what I was feeling. What you're experiencing is a profound betrayal, she said when I finally finished, not just of trust, but of the fundamental bond between parent and child. It's completely normal to feel angry, hurt, confused, even guilty. Guilty. Why should I feel guilty? I didn't do anything wrong. Parents of adult children who disappoint them often feel guilt. We wonder what we did wrong in raising them, what we missed, how we failed them. But Eleanor, Michael made his own choices. His decision to gamble, to steal, to deceive, those aren't reflections of your parenting. Those are reflections of his own struggles and poor judgment. Something about hearing that from a professional, someone objective who didn't know me or Michael, lifted a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. We talked for the full hour, and by the end, Dr. Morrison gave me some homework. I want you to write a letter to Michael. Not to send, just for yourself. Tell him everything you're feeling without filtering it for his protection. Anger, hurt, disappointment, even love if you still feel it. Just get it all out. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a pad of paper and a pen. I started writing, and once I started, I couldn't stop. Pages and pages of everything I'd been holding inside. Michael, you broke my heart, not just by stealing from me, but by throwing me away, like I meant nothing. I gave you life, raised you alone after your father died, sacrificed my own happiness and opportunities to make sure you had everything you needed, and you repaid me by trying to destroy my financial security. Do you know how that feels? To discover that your own child sees you as nothing more than a resource to be exploited? I wrote about the nights I'd worked double shifts at the hospital to pay for his college tuition, about turning down a promotion that would have required relocation because I didn't want to disrupt his high school years, about the years after Daniel died when I was drowning in grief, but stayed strong because Michael needed me to be strong. I would have helped you if you'd asked. If you'd come to me and said, "Mom, I'm in trouble, I have a problem," I would have done anything to help you. But instead, you lied. You forged documents. You tried to steal from me. And then you cut me out of your life to make it easier to continue stealing. By the time I finished, it was past midnight, and I'd filled 11 pages, front and back. My hand was cramping, and my eyes were swollen from crying. But I felt lighter somehow, like I'd lanced a wound and let all the poison out. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd give it to Michael. Maybe not, but it existed, and that was enough. The next morning, Wednesday, May 29th, Richard called me. "Everything's ready. All the documents are prepared, filed, and copied. Are you ready to move forward?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment where I stopped being the victim and started being the woman who fought back. "I'm ready." "Okay. I'm going to have my assistant serve Michael with all the documents tomorrow morning at his workplace. The cease and desist, notification of estate changes, demand for repayment of the $18,000, and the offer of resolution through counseling and treatment. He'll have 72 hours to respond. What if he just ignores it? Then we file a police report for the identity theft attempt and let the authorities handle it from there. But Eleanor, I don't think he'll ignore it. From everything you've told me and everything we've uncovered, Michael is in crisis mode. This will force him to face what he's done." That evening, I called my sister-in-law, Brenda, to update her on everything. She'd been checking in with me regularly, being the support system I desperately needed. "Eleanor, I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself. I know this isn't easy. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, harder than watching Daniel die. At least then, I knew I was losing him through no fault of anyone's. This feels like I'm choosing to lose my son. You're not losing him. You're setting boundaries and demanding accountability. That's what love looks like sometimes. Real love isn't letting people hurt you without consequence. Real love is saying, I care about you enough to make you face your problems." I held on to those words like a lifeline. Thursday morning, May 30th, I woke up at 5:30, unable to sleep. I knew Richard's assistant would be serving Michael around 9 o'clock at his office downtown. I imagined him sitting at his desk, maybe drinking coffee, maybe reviewing blueprints for whatever project he was working on. And then someone would walk in and hand him an envelope that would destroy his carefully constructed denial. At 9:15, my phone rang. It was Richard. "It's done. Michael's been served." My assistant said he went pale when he saw what was in the envelope. He asked if there was any way to speak with you, and she told him he needed to respond through official channels within 72 hours. Did he say anything else? He asked if you were really going to press charges. She told him that was entirely dependent on his response and cooperation. I sat down on my couch, my heart pounding. It was done. No taking it back now. I'd fired the first real shot in this battle, and now I had to wait and see how Michael would respond. The rest of that Thursday crawled by. I couldn't focus on anything. I tried to read, but couldn't concentrate. Tried to watch television, but nothing held my attention. I just kept checking my phone, waiting for something. Anything. At 7:30 that evening, my phone finally rang. Michael's name on the screen. My hands shook as I answered. "Mom." His voice was broken, raw with emotion. "Mom, what have I done?" I didn't say anything. I couldn't trust myself to speak yet. "I got the papers today. I read everything, every detail of what I did, laid out in black and white. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry." "Sorry for what, Michael? Sorry you did it? Or sorry you got caught?" He made a sound that was half sob, half gasp. "Both. God help me. Both. But mostly sorry I did it. Sorry I hurt you. Sorry I threw you out of my life. Sorry I treated you like an ATM instead of my mother." "Why?" My voice cracked on the word. "Why would you do this to me? Because I'm weak. Because I'm a coward. because I made stupid decisions and then made even stupider decisions trying to fix them. Mom, I have a problem. With the betting. I've had it for years, and it just kept getting worse. And instead of asking for help, I kept trying to fix it by betting more, and I just dug myself deeper and deeper. And Tiffany knew? A long pause. She suspected something was wrong, but I hid the worst of it from her. When she pushed to cut you out, I went along with it because I thought if you weren't around asking questions, I could keep hiding how bad things were. Mom, I'm not making excuses. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you in the worst possible way. I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. You tried to steal $85,000 from me, Michael. You forged my signature. You used my social security number. Do you understand how serious that is? You could have ruined my credit, destroyed my financial security, left me with nothing. I know. God, I know. If you want to press charges, I understand. I deserve whatever happens to me. What I want, I said, my voice steady despite the tears, is for you to get help. Real help. Professional treatment for your addiction. Financial counseling. And I want you to make this right. Not just with me, but with your children. They're going to be hurt by all of this, and you need to be the father they deserve. I'll do anything. Whatever you want, whatever it takes. I'll go to treatment. I'll get counseling. I'll work 3 jobs if I have to pay you back every cent. You have 72 hours to respond formally to the legal documents. Richard Peterson is handling everything. You work with him, you cooperate completely, you do everything he and I require, and I won't press charges. But Michael, if you ever do anything like this again, if you ever try to manipulate me or steal from me or use my information without permission, I will turn everything over to the police without hesitation. Am I absolutely clear? Crystal clear. Mom, can I ask you something? What? Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. Did I have forgiveness in me for this? Could I ever look at my son the same way again? I don't know, Michael. I honestly don't know. Right now, I'm so hurt and so angry that forgiveness feels impossible. But I'm willing to see if we can rebuild something. Not what we had before, because that's gone. But maybe something new. Something based on honesty and respect instead of blind trust. That's more than I deserve. Yes, it is. Don't waste the chance. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, processing everything. My son had broken down. He'd admitted what he'd done. He'd agreed to get help. This was progress, real progress. But I also knew that words were easy. Actions would be what mattered. And I needed to stay strong, stay vigilant, and not let my love for him blind me to reality again. The next morning, Friday, May 31st, Richard called again. Michael's attorney contacted me. He's agreeing to all terms. He'll enter an inpatient treatment program for addiction, complete financial counseling, repay the $18,000 in monthly installments, and accept the reduced inheritance without contest. Eleanor, I think he's serious about this. I hope so, for his sake and for his children's sake. There's one more thing. Tiffany filed for divorce yesterday. It's going to be messy. She's asking for full custody of the children and significant spousal support. She's also claiming she had no knowledge of Michael's financial issues, which we both know is questionable at best. My protective instincts kicked in. Can she really take the kids away from him completely? She can try, but Michael's going to need a good family law attorney, and he's going to need to prove he's getting his life together. The treatment program will help with that. I found myself in a strange position. I was still angry at Michael for what he'd done, but I was also angry at Tiffany for abandoning him when he needed help, for using his crisis as an opportunity to take everything. Maybe that made me a hypocrite. Maybe it just made me a mother who, despite everything, still wanted her child to have a chance at redemption. Over the weekend, I got updates from various sources. Michael had checked himself into a 30-day residential treatment program at a facility in Asheville. Tiffany had moved out of the house and was staying with her parents in Raleigh with the children. The house was going into foreclosure because Michael couldn't make the payments. And me? I spent the weekend with Dr. Morrison, processing everything that had happened. She helped me understand that healing from this would take time, that it was okay to feel conflicting emotions, that I could be angry and hurt and still hope for my son's recovery all at the same time. You're not weak for still loving him, she told me. You're human, And you're a mother. Those bonds don't break easily, even when they're damaged. On Monday, June 3rd, I did something I'd been thinking about for days. I drove to Raleigh to see my grandchildren. I didn't tell Tiffany I was coming. I just showed up at her parents' house at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right when school would be letting out. When Ethan and Olivia saw me, they ran into my arms like no time had passed at all. "Grandma, where have you been? We missed you so much." I held them tight, breathing in their little kid smell of sunshine and playground and innocence. "I missed you too, my darlings, so much." Tiffany appeared on the porch, her face tight. "Eleanor, you can't just show up here." I stood up, still holding Olivia's hand. "Actually, I can. These are my grandchildren, and unless you have a restraining order against me, which you don't, I have every right to see them. After everything Michael did, what Michael did has nothing to do with my relationship with these children. I've set up trust funds for both of them, funds that will ensure their futures regardless of what happens with you and Michael. I've been documenting every attempt you've made to keep me away from them, and if you try to cut me out of their lives, I will fight you legally. Am I making myself clear?" Tiffany's face flushed. She'd never seen this side of me before, the side that didn't back down or apologize. "Fine, you can see them, but I'm staying right here. That's perfectly acceptable." I spent 2 hours with Ethan and Olivia, playing games, listening to their stories about school, being their grandmother. They didn't need to know about the adult drama happening around them. They just needed to know they were loved. As I was leaving, Ethan hugged me and whispered, "Grandma, is Daddy okay? Mommy won't tell us anything." I knelt down to his level, looking into his worried 9-year-old eyes. "Your daddy is sick right now, but he's getting help so he can get better. And no matter what happens between your mom and dad, I want you to know that you and Olivia are the most important things in the world. You're loved, you're safe, and you're going to be okay. I promise." He nodded, and I saw some of the tension leave his little shoulders. Driving back to Charlotte that evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not complete peace. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace of knowing I'd done everything I could to protect myself and the people I loved. I'd set boundaries. I'd demanded accountability. I'd fought back, and whatever happened next, I'd face it with my eyes wide open and my spine straight. Because I'd learned something crucial through all of this. Being kind doesn't mean being weak, and loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. I was Eleanor Richardson, 72 years old, a retired nurse, a widow, a grandmother, and a survivor. And I was just getting started. The day of reckoning came on a Tuesday morning, June 11th, 2024, at exactly 10:30. Richard Peterson had arranged for a formal meeting at his office with Michael, his attorney, Tiffany, her attorney, and me. The purpose was to settle all outstanding issues and put everything in writing so there would be no ambiguity going forward. I'd barely slept the night before. I kept rehearsing in my mind what I wanted to say, how I wanted to present myself. Strong, but not cruel. Firm, but not vindictive. A mother who'd been hurt, but wasn't broken. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a navy blue suit I'd bought specifically for this meeting. I wanted to look professional, in control, not like the crying woman who'd been dismissed from her son's house 7 weeks earlier. Michael arrived next, and my heart clenched when I saw him. He'd lost weight, at least 15 pounds he couldn't afford to lose. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow with dark circles underneath. But there was something different too. A clarity in his expression that hadn't been there before. He looked at me with such raw pain and regret that I had to look away. "Mom," he started, but I held up my hand. "Not yet. Let's get through the formal part first." Tiffany arrived last, dressed in an expensive designer outfit, her makeup perfect, her hair styled. She barely looked at Michael, didn't look at me at all. She exuded an air of cold detachment that made me wonder how I'd ever felt sympathy for her postpartum struggles. Richard called the meeting to order. "We're here to address 3 main issues. First, the outstanding debt owed by Michael Richardson to Eleanor Richardson. Second, the restructuring of Eleanor's estate and the establishment of trust funds for the minor children. Third, visitation rights for Eleanor with her grandchildren during and after the divorce proceedings." For the next hour, we went through everything methodically. Michael's attorney presented a repayment plan, $500 per month until the $18,000 was repaid in full, with interest. It would take 3 years, but it was manageable based on his income once he returned to work. Richard presented the revised will and trust documents. Michael listened as Richard explained that he would receive only 30% of my estate, approximately $105,000, while the remaining 70% would be divided equally between trusts for Ethan and Olivia. "Do you understand these terms, Michael?" Richard asked. "Yes, sir, and I accept them completely. It's more than I deserve after what I did." Tiffany's attorney spoke up then. "My client wants it on record that she had no knowledge of Mr. Richardson's fraudulent activities and should not be held responsible for his actions." I couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Your client knew something was very wrong. She may not have known the specific details, but she was aware enough to push for cutting me out of the family. She was protecting herself while enabling his behavior." Tiffany finally looked at me, her eyes flashing. I was protecting my children from an overbearing grandmother who couldn't respect boundaries. "You were protecting yourself from questions you didn't want to answer. But you know what? I'm done arguing with you. You're divorcing Michael, you're taking the children, and honestly, you two deserve each other's absence. What I care about is maintaining a relationship with Ethan and Olivia." Richard intervened. "Which brings us to the third item. Eleanor is requesting guaranteed visitation rights with her grandchildren, separate from Michael's parental rights. In North Carolina, grandparents can petition for visitation, and given Eleanor's long-standing relationship with the children and her financial support for their futures, a court would likely grant her request." Tiffany's attorney whispered something to her. She looked unhappy but nodded. "Fine. Eleanor can have visitation, every other weekend, supervised initially." "Supervised?" I felt my blood pressure rising. "I've never done anything to harm those children." "Why would it need to be supervised?" "Because I don't trust that you won't try to turn them against me," Tiffany said coldly. Richard leaned forward. "Mrs. Richardson, if you insist on supervised visitation, we'll take this to court, and I assure you that Eleanor will win unsupervised rights. She's never been accused of any improper behavior with the children. This is punitive, and a judge will see it that way." Tiffany's attorney whispered to her again, more urgently this time. She sighed. "Fine, unsupervised, every other weekend, and 1 weeknight dinner per week," I added. "I want to maintain regular contact with them, not just be a weekend obligation." Another whispered consultation. Agreed. With the legal matters settled, Richard asked if anyone had anything else they wanted to address. I looked at Michael, who'd been silent through most of the meeting, his head down, his hands clasped on the table. "I'd like to speak to my son privately for a few minutes, if that's possible." Richard nodded and everyone filed out, leaving Michael and me alone in the conference room. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. "Look at me, Michael." He raised his head slowly, and I saw tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I don't even know where to begin. I'm sorry it doesn't come close to covering what I've done to you. You're right, it doesn't. Do you understand what you put me through? The fear, the betrayal, the complete destruction of trust between us? I do. Every day in treatment I think about it. They make us write letters to the people we've hurt. I've written you 17 letters, Mom. 17 attempts to explain, to apologize, to make sense of how I could do something so terrible to the person who sacrificed everything for me. Why didn't you just ask me for help? If you'd come to me and said, 'Mom, I have a problem, I need help,' I would have done anything. Instead, you tried to steal from me and then cut me out of your life." He put his face in his hands. "Because I was ashamed. Because asking for help meant admitting I'd failed. And you'd already lost Dad, and I was supposed to be the strong one, the successful one who made you proud. How could I tell you I'd turned into someone who gambled away everything? So instead, you decided to make me a victim of your choices. Yes, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. Mom, I know I've destroyed what we had. I know you probably can't ever look at me the same way, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be someone you can be proud of again. Not for me, but for Ethan and Olivia. They deserve a father who's honest and reliable and present." I sat back in my chair, studying the man my son had become. Broken, humbled, but maybe finally honest. The treatment program, is it helping? More than I expected. I've learned I was using the addiction to cope with anxiety and feelings of inadequacy. The high of winning, even when it was temporary, made me feel successful for a little while. And when I lost, I'd chase that high again, trying to recapture it. And now I'm learning healthier ways to cope. Therapy, meetings, actually talking about my feelings instead of burying them in bets. It's hard, Mom. Some days I want to gamble so badly I can barely breathe, but I think about what I've lost, what I've done, and I force myself to make a different choice. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said something I'd been holding on to since this whole nightmare started. I love you, Michael. Despite everything, despite the hurt and the anger and the betrayal, you're still my son, and I still love you. But I don't like you very much right now, and I don't trust you. Those things, you're going to have to earn back over time through consistent actions, not words. I understand, and I'll do whatever it takes for as long as it takes. Good, because Ethan and Olivia need you. They need you to be stable and present and honest with them. This divorce is going to be hard on them, and you need to step up and be the father they deserve, not the mess you've been. I will. I promise. Don't promise. Just do it. Promises from you don't mean much to me right now. He flinched but nodded. You're right. I stood up. The repayment plan starts next month. $500 on the first of every month. No excuses, no exceptions. You miss a payment without a legitimate emergency, and I press charges. Understood? Understood. And Michael? Get a therapist. A good one. Someone who specializes in addiction and family trauma. You've got a long road ahead of you, and you can't do it alone. I already have one. Dr. Marcus Chen at the treatment center is going to continue seeing me as an outpatient twice a week. Good. Use him. Be honest with him. Do the work. As I walked toward the door, Michael called out, Mom? Do you think you'll ever forgive me? Really forgive me? I turned back to look at him. I don't know. Maybe. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean things go back to how they were. That Eleanor, the one who trusted you completely, she's gone. You killed her when you forged my signature and tried to steal from me. What's left is someone harder. Someone who won't be taken advantage of again. If you want a relationship with this version of me, you're going to have to accept that. Over the next few months, life slowly found a new rhythm. Michael completed his 30-day inpatient program and transitioned to intensive outpatient treatment. He moved into a small apartment in East Charlotte, nothing fancy, and returned to work part-time while continuing his recovery program. The first payment of $500 arrived on July 1st, exactly on time. And every month after that, he was keeping his word, at least about that. I saw Ethan and Olivia every other weekend and every Wednesday for dinner. At first, it was awkward. They'd ask questions about why Mommy and Daddy weren't together anymore, why Daddy lived in a different house, why everything had changed. I answered as honestly as I could without burdening them with adult problems. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, I told them, and sometimes those mistakes mean things have to change, but what doesn't change is how much you're loved. Tiffany and I maintained a coldly polite relationship. We'd exchange the children at neutral locations, barely speaking beyond the necessary logistics. I didn't try to be her friend anymore. That ship had sailed and sunk. In August, Michael asked if he could see me one-on-one, not for any legal reason, just to talk. We met at a coffee shop in Plaza Midwood, a neutral space where neither of us had history. He looked better, healthier. He'd gained back some of the weight, and his eyes were clearer. I wanted to update you on everything, he said. I've been sober from the betting for 3 months and 11 days. I go to meetings 4 times a week. I'm working with a financial counselor to rebuild my credit and pay off my debts. That's good, Michael. I'm glad you're getting your life together. I also wanted to ask your advice about something. Ethan came to me last week and asked why we don't see Grandma Eleanor together anymore. He said he misses having everyone together. My chest tightened. What did you tell him? I told him the truth, age-appropriately, that Daddy made some bad choices that hurt people, including Grandma, and that we're working on fixing things, but it takes time. He asked if I said sorry to you. I told him I did, many times, but that sometimes sorry isn't enough to fix everything right away. That was a good answer. Mom, I'm not asking to be part of your life again, not the way I was. I know that's not possible, but I'm asking if maybe, eventually, we could do something with the kids together. Not regularly, not making it confusing for them, but maybe Christmas or their birthdays, we could be in the same room without it being this terrible, awkward thing. I thought about it, really thought about it. Could I sit across a table from my son and not feel the sharp edges of betrayal? Could I watch him interact with his children and not remember how he'd used them as shields for his lies? Ask me again at Christmas. If you've kept every promise between now and then, if you've stayed in recovery, if you've been the father those kids deserve, Then maybe we can try. But Michael, if you slip even once, if you give me any reason to doubt you're serious about this, then the answer is no. Fair enough. Thank you for even considering it. September brought unexpected news. Tiffany's father, a successful real estate developer, was under investigation for financial irregularities. The family money she'd been so proud of, that had funded her designer wardrobe and expensive tastes, was suddenly uncertain. She'd tied her future to her parents' wealth, and now that was crumbling. I felt a grim satisfaction in that, not because I wished her harm, but because karma was doing its work without me having to lift a finger. In October, on what would have been Daniel's 80th birthday, I visited his grave for the first time in months. I told him everything that had happened, talking to the headstone like he could hear me. Our boy screwed up, Daniel. Badly, but he's trying to fix it. I don't know if he'll succeed, but he's trying. I think you'd want me to give him that chance, wouldn't you? To earn his way back? The wind rustled through the trees, and I chose to take it as agreement. By November, I'd settled into my new normal. I'd sold my house in Myers Park, the one I'd shared with Daniel, where I'd raised Michael. It hurt to let it go, but I didn't need that much space anymore, and the equity gave me financial security. I bought a smaller condo in Dilworth, modern and manageable, with a spare room for when the grandchildren visited. The trust funds for Ethan and Olivia were growing nicely, protected and untouchable. They'd have security I never had at their age, opportunities their father's choices couldn't steal from them. Dr. Morrison and I still met every other week. She'd helped me understand that healing from betrayal isn't linear. Some days I'd feel strong and empowered. Other days I'd cry over old photos and mourn the relationship I'd lost with my son. Both reactions were valid. Both were part of processing trauma. And then came December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. Michael called and asked if we could meet. I have something to show you. We met at the coffee shop again, our neutral ground. He handed me a folder. This is my 90-day review from Dr. Chen and my financial counselor. I wanted you to see it. I opened the folder and read through the documents. Michael had attended every single recovery meeting. He'd had 0 relapses. His credit counselor noted he was ahead on his debt repayment plan. Dr. Chen's evaluation described him as actively engaged in recovery, demonstrating insight into his behaviors, and committed to long-term change. This is impressive, Michael. I also have this. He pulled out a check. It's for $1,000. I know I'm only obligated to pay $500 a month, but I got a small bonus at work, and I wanted to use it to pay down what I owe you faster. I don't want this debt hanging over us any longer than necessary. I looked at the check, then at my son. He'd kept his word for 8 months straight. He'd done everything he said he'd do. That didn't erase what he'd done, but it was something. Thank you. This means a lot. So, about Christmas. Ethan and Olivia are with me Christmas Eve and morning. I was wondering if maybe you'd want to come over Christmas morning, just for a couple hours, to watch them open presents. You don't have to stay long and there's no pressure. I just thought, yes. He looked shocked. Yes, I'll come. But Michael, I need you to understand something. This doesn't mean everything's fixed. This doesn't mean we're back to normal. This is me taking one small step toward rebuilding something with you. That's all. I understand. And Mom, that's more than enough. That's more than I deserve. Christmas morning, I arrived at Michael's modest apartment at 9 o'clock. It was small but clean, decorated with a scraggly tree and homemade ornaments the kids had made. Ethan and Olivia screamed when they saw me. "Grandma, you're here! Daddy said you might come." We spent 3 hours together, just the 4 of us, opening presents, eating cinnamon rolls, playing with toys. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments, stilted conversations, but there were also genuine smiles, real laughter, and something that felt like the beginning of healing. As I was leaving, Michael walked me to my car. "Thank you for giving me this chance. Don't thank me yet. Keep doing the work. Keep being honest. Keep putting those kids first. That's how you thank me." I will. Every day, I will. Driving home, I thought about everything that had happened over the past 8 months. The devastating rejection, the shocking discoveries, the decision to fight back, the legal battles, the slow rebuilding. None of it had been easy. All of it had changed me fundamentally. But I'd survived. More than survived. I'd protected myself and my grandchildren. I'd refused to be a victim. I'd demanded accountability and respect. Was I the same Eleanor who'd walked out of Michael's house in April with tears streaming down her face? No, that woman was gone, and I didn't mourn her. She'd been too trusting, too willing to sacrifice herself, too afraid to rock the boat. The woman I'd become was harder, yes, but also wiser. Still loving, but with boundaries. Still generous, but not to her own detriment. Still a mother and grandmother, but one who understood that real love sometimes means saying no, drawing lines, demanding better. Today, as I write this in March of 2025, Michael has been in recovery for 11 months. He hasn't missed a single payment. He sees his children regularly and is actively involved in their lives. He and I have dinner once a month, slowly rebuilding trust through consistent actions over time. Tiffany's family weathered their financial scandal and is recovering. She started dating someone new and seems content. We're civil with each other at kid handoffs, sometimes even pleasant. Ethan and Olivia are thriving. They know their family looks different than other families, but they're secure in being loved. They don't know about the trust funds yet, but someday they'll understand that their grandmother fought for their futures even when their father couldn't. And me? I'm 73 now, still healthy, still independent, still learning who I am in this chapter of my life. I have my therapy appointments, my book club, my volunteer work at the hospital. I have my grandchildren every other weekend and Wednesday dinners. I have a son who's working every day to deserve a place in my life. It's not the life I imagined I'd have at this age, but it's mine, and I've fought for every piece of it. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to set boundaries with family or fight back against betrayal, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even when it's family. Subscribe for more true stories of survival and strength. And most importantly, remember this: loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold someone accountable and demand they do better. Because that's what real family means. Not blind loyalty, not endless second chances without change, but honest love that requires respect, boundaries, and the courage to fight for what's right. Thank you for letting me share my story. Now go watch the next video about another family who learned these same hard lessons. You're not alone in this journey.